The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom just got a new trailer yesterday, and people are coping and seething. People are not happy that this game is shaping up to be an absolute gem, is going to be really, really popular, and it's coming out barely a year after The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which was also a great game. People cannot grasp the fact that Nintendo was able to put out such a high quality new entry in this franchise so quickly. Meanwhile, something like Baldur's Gate 3 can't even get finished, right? It took 2 years for them to put out that little DLC expansion, shit stain on the turd tree for Elden Dingling, right? Like, other companies cannot compete with Nintendo in any way, shape, or form. And right now, people are scrambling to try and find some reason to hate on Echoes of Wisdom, right? And they're really struggling because all of their weird hot take opinions that they were using to weaponize against Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, like, oh, where's our top-down Zelda game? Oh, why can't we play a Zelda? Oh, the mechanics are always the same, right? Echoes of Wisdom is a nice deviation, a nice spin-off title that actually addresses some of those complaints. And when you spent an entire year complaining about how Tears of the Kingdom isn't different enough than Breath of the Wild, this radically different Zelda game is something that you can't just turn around and downplay, especially since it's still too soon to backtrack and pretend that Tears of the Kingdom was a good game, right? Again, this is a really interesting situation because you're seeing everyone come out and try to say Echoes of Wisdom looks terrible and that it's not going to be very good, but it all amounts to praising a bunch of things that the Zelda community also pretends are bad and also pretends aren't very good, right? Tears of the Kingdom is the most obvious, but I think the most telling is the sheer amount of people who are coming out trying to tell you that, like, well, I actually liked Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword. Like, the Nintendo deviating from that formula has made the series lose its identity. When, like, everyone knows, anybody who grew up in that period knows that everybody hated every Zelda game that came out after Ocarina. I remember, going online and being told that Twilight Princess was like a disaster, right? I remember Majora's Mask and how, like, it was hated when it was first came out and then it became a cult classic by 2008, right? I remember, like, Wind Waker being like a kiddie game was a meme, right? So much so that people still talk about that today, right? Like, I remember how wildly hated those games were. And, like, you can even find some extremist, weird, conspiracy, like, online, like, Ocarina of Time is just a remake of A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past casualized the franchise from the NES days. Like, again, you can find people who will tell you that Zelda hasn't been good since the original. Which, of course, isn't true. Which, of course, has no basis in reality. Which, of course, is ridiculous. But you see a lot of people come out and do it anyway. Why? Because Zelda cannot be allowed to be seen as the best video game franchise in gaming, right? They have to go to extreme lengths to keep people from realizing that Nintendo is the best developer in the industry. The instant that people realize that these games are actually far better than the slop they're playing on PlayStation and Xbox with better mechanics, more content, better gameplay, the instant that happens, like, there will be no more interest in PlayStation and Xbox. So they have to religiously do this thing where they have to pretend that, like, Zelda is somehow inferior to its competitors, even though that, like, Zelda is, like, leaps and bounds ahead of them, right? I remember a decade ago, it was, like, really common to say that, like, Okami was better, that Darksiders was better, that Dark Souls was better. And now look at that. Like, all of those are dead IPs. right? That nobody cares about or remembers unless you're like, trying to desperately find some like Zelda alternative that that like that is better than Zelda, right? Like again, this has been happening for a long time, decades. Like this is, I think, the central aspect of the Pretendo movement is is just aggressively downplaying every Zelda game that comes out, like refusing to acknowledge just how good they are, just how much they innovate, just how gorgeous the art styles are, just how much there is to do in them. Right, every single time they go to these extreme lengths to downplay like everything. Right, like again, we're at the point now where we're seeing people say that like, oh, Tears of the Kingdom bombed because people got bored of the Breath of the Wild formula 10 hours in, which is of course like a blatant lie, which is absurd, which is ridiculous, but you have people like trying to push that narrative. You have people trying to like demonize the puzzle designs of Echoes of Wisdom. I've talked about this before. Like again, there are all of these examples, all of these ridiculous narratives that are just being thrown at Echoes of Wisdom right now. You have people saying it's woke. You have people saying the map is a rehash of A Link to the Past. You have people like trying to say that like uh, the game will be trivialized by the mechanics. Like, oh, I'll just use the best monster throughout the entire thing and just cheese it, right? Like you're seeing people like refuse to engage with the mechanics. That was something with Tears of the Kingdom that's becoming apparent, is that like the vast majority of the people who criticize it don't know anything about how the game actually works. Right, like that's been a reoccurring thing over the past year, to the point where I've seen Twitter users bring it up. Is that like people don't fuse their weapons and they don't know how to build things, and then they like start like justifying it, like, why would I do those things? Yeah, because it's fun, genius. Like they're not engaging with the actual gameplay at all. They keep thinking that like they have to play the game in a certain way, but the reality is the game is so much more open and so much more well designed than like they can even wrap their minds around. Like when I look at DSP, walking through that thunderstorm and then getting struck by lightning, I think to myself that like that mechanic was in Breath of the Wild. How exactly does he not know how to deal with lightning? And the answer, simply put, is that he doesn't know anything about these games. That he doesn't appreciate them, that he doesn't appreciate the artistry or the nuance or the mechanics of the gameplay. Like, he just cheeses his way through the entire game and then tries to tell you that, like, oh, the game wasn't very good. Like, yeah, because you weren't playing it properly. That's what this all comes down to. People with no skill, no appreciation, no ability to discern why a game is good. These are the people who are making statements on Zelda. These are the people who are downplaying Echoes of Wisdom, Tears of the Kingdom, and every other Zelda game in history, right? These are the people that you're allowing to control the narrative when it comes to Nintendo games. And this is why they should not be allowed to speak up or have opinions, right? These kind of people do not have the credentials, they don't have the ability, they don't have the mental capacity to process whether a video game is good or bad. This needs to be acknowledged more often. I am seriously anticipating the release of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I expect it to be one of the best games of the year. And there's really nothing that these people can do to stop me from buying this game, talking about it, and ensuring that it remains popular and enjoyed for generations to come.